Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show on 6-7 The Score. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune at House Hall covering the Bears. And this is a special mailbag episode. You have questions. We have answers. Adam Studzinski, our producer, will be the mailman, if you will, or the mail carrier, we should say. Adam will have the questions that you have sent to us either via X or Twitter, or that you have emailed to us at our email address at it's take the north at
take the north pod at gmail.com. Come on, David.
There we are. Okay, I have too many email addresses and show titles and everything in my head. So we are going to do a podcast of mailbag questions. Let's bring in Adam to start asking the questions so we can start getting to the answers. There you go. There's Adam.
Hi, guys. All right. We'll start with our Twitter account for this one. So it's at Take the North Pod on Twitter. This is kind of two people basically had the similar type of question. So we'll kind of merge this one together. This is from at SquareTail99 on Twitter. With all the polls love going on, why did he neglect both lines in the offseason? They had the resources to get better talent there. Justin Jones is gone. Sweat is not immune from injury, as are others. And then a comment he adds, third place finish at best, possibly last place. And then I'll tag this with another one from at Nick Ritchie 11. Every year since Poles has arrived, the D-line has been a weak spot of the team. I believe in Sweat being number one, but the rest of the line is question marks. Your response, fellas.
Okay, I'll start there. I'll start first. First of all, I think Ryan Poles had an outstanding offseason, and it always brings me back when people complain about teams, general managers that have what I consider strong off seasons. Is what Jerry Angelo told me one of the first years that I was covering the Bears and I was ripping the Bears, and he just basically took me into his office, sat me down and said, I respect what you have to do. Criticism is part of it, but you got to understand one thing. As much as we would like to, realistically, you can't fill every need every off season. It's just unrealistic, and fans can hold them to that standard, and we should as media members in a press corps. But realistically, I don't know what really Ryan Poles truly neglected, because offensively they drafted in a third round Amagaji as a depth piece behind Braxton Jones. I think realistically, they went out in free agency, Ryan Bates and Coleman Shelton. I mean, they addressed things that were needs in terms of the offensive line. Defensive line, okay. They didn't go out and get a defensive tackle, but a guy like Keith Randall, undrafted free agent from Illinois, maybe he develops into something. You can't do everything every offseason. So while I have concerns about the offensive line and its health and ability to stay on the field, attrition is a thing. I also think it's realistic. There's no team in the league that's going into this season without question marks at one position.
Yeah, you're going to have question marks, and I do think that Ryan did his best. But I do also understand the anxiety and the worry. Nick Ritchie pointed out that the Bears are counting on a big jump from Gervon Dexter. That's a big leap of faith that they have to take here, that they can develop this second round pick into a guy who can be an impact starter for years and years to come. They are also counting on somebody on the edge to complement Montez Sweat, whether that's DeMarcus Walker or Austin Booker or Jacob Martin. You got to find somebody that can give you a little bit of teeth in that pass rush. And maybe it is, as we talked about on our last episode, a committee approach to trying to get that production. On the offensive line, you mentioned you signed Coleman Shelton, you trade for Ryan Bates, you draft Amagaji. So you did make moves. Ultimately, I think I am 3 years in a little bit surprised that there hasn't been a greater investment on those lines. At the same time, they just paid Montez Sweat. They used a top 10 pick in Darnell Wright. They're going piece by piece to try to fortify this thing in a way that's practical and makes sense with everything else you have going on with your team. And so now Ryan's just got to try to bring the best out of the guys that he has pushed his chips in on. And that includes Dexter. It includes, some of the offensive linemen. It includes to some extent Braxton Jones, who is going to be one of these real wild cards in the next month to see if he's healthy enough to survive an entire training camp. And if he's not, and you go to week one, kind of leaning on Larry Borum as your starting left tackle to protect the greatest asset that the franchise has had at quarterback in a long time, then I understand the trepidation completely.
Last point on the question, the Bears, remember, could finish in third place in the division and still make the playoffs. The division could potentially be that good.
No question.
All right, next question.
All right, we'll stay on Twitter for this one. This one is from @JacobCraft12. Pretty straightforward. How long into the regular season until we see the Bears offense performing at a high level?
Jacob has a question. Dan, you can start there.
First quarter of the Titans game, week 1, Soldier Field, season opener. They'll be humming by halftime, my friend. That's obviously the hope. I think you're going to want to use everything up until the bye week to get a real accurate gauge of who you are and who you are not. So that gets you. It's week 6 or week 7 is the bye, I believe, correct? And so you're going to have a big enough sample size to know what Caleb can handle. You're going to have a big enough sample size to know what's still a little bit too much for him. Shane Waldron's going to have that to be constantly evolving and figuring that whole puzzle out. But I think that's a realistic timeline, particularly with a defense that can carry you in the early going, to provide a little bit of, I don't know, I guess it would be runway for the offense to get itself going. And then when you come back out of the bye, you better have some answers that allow you to play football at a level where the playoff talk is not just hopeful, but it's like, this is how we make our charge and this is how the offense does its part.
I think that's a good answer. I think it also depends on what the offensive emphasis becomes. If Shane Waldron is committed to the running game in a real way, I think you're going to find continuity and it's going to be clicking earlier rather than later. I think the running game is easier to envision going and working at a high level before you get the passing game and some of the things that might depend on timing, protection, and chemistry. If you want to establish the running game and become a run first team, which I don't think a lot of people envision with the Bears, because we talk about the trio of wide receivers and the arm talent of Caleb Williams. But, if you run the football effectively, that becomes your identity quicker and sooner. I don't know if that will be the first quarter of the first game. That is wishful thinking, unrealistic. But I do think by the end of the month, by the first quarter of the season, if you will, you'd like to know which the Bears are going to be primarily going to be their strength, running the ball or using their quarterback in their passing game. And maybe by then, if they can stay healthy, it's all predicated on that, then maybe you can start to decide or see some sort of continuity and identity. Next.
All right, we'll head over to our Gmail for this one, guys. So again, takethenorthpod@gmail.com. This is from George Palmer, regular contributor to the Take the North podcast. He says that Ryan Poles has been enjoying a well-deserved victory lap and pretty much universal praise. Obviously, besides the one person for that the question we had earlier. With that short video snippet we got in the draft room, it appears his reliance on Ian Cunningham is significant. How much credit should Ian Cunningham be given? If he leaves for a GM position, how impactful will that be to Ryan Poles' effectiveness?
That's a great question. I think that we don't know the answer to that until he's gone. I think that here's what I like about Ian Cunningham, even though I'm not sure, and there are other collaborations in Chicago sports where you've always kind of wondered, and maybe the most, not wondered, but there's always been the duo, right? Jed and Theo with the Cubs. You look at when the Bears were with Jerry Angelo, he had a couple different, it wasn't quite as obvious with Bobby DePaul and his pro personnel director, but I think that with the Bears, Ian Cunningham's role is respected and I sense pretty valuable. Dan, here's what I like about Ian Cunningham. He took his name out of consideration for some jobs. Didn't he turn down the Arizona Cardinals a year ago? I'm not quite sure if he was offered that job or it looked like he could have gotten it and he decided to pull out. I like a guy who stays in a role that doesn't necessarily reward his ego, but it does create a lot of self-satisfaction. That tells me that he's a team player. It tells me he's offering pretty good, sound advice and guidance. And I like the way this is working together. So Ryan Poles doesn't necessarily need Ian Cunningham, but I do think that he benefits from his presence.
And he benefits from having an assistant GM. And that was one of the things that when Ryan came aboard in 2022, we said, this is good. This is good to have somebody else that can be your right-hand man, somebody else that you feel you can trust to give you the straight up honest truth as opposed to what you want to hear about every situation. And so I think there's been a really healthy relationship now going on 3 years for Ian and Ryan to challenge each other, to test each other, to have those healthy back and forths that help you get to solid decisions. You remember on draft weekend where it was Ian Cunningham who kind of told Ryan Poles to sit still a little bit and let the draft board unfold when Ryan started to get a little antsy and was so fearful of losing Rome Odunze that he was thinking about moving up and trading some valuable draft assets to go get the guy that he really wanted. Ultimately, it turned out well. They took a gamble, prodded by Ian Cunningham, and won on that gamble because they got Rome Odunze at a cheaper price that way. And so I do think that's been healthy for a few years for those guys to go back and forth. I think Ryan also has guys in Jeff King and Trey Koziel in the front office that he knows he can lean on. And when you have kind of that collective unity within that realm, it pushes you forward in a healthy way. Now, again, all these moves, they got to turn into on-field results. Otherwise, the victory laps are pretty hollow. And ultimately, as Mark Potash, our friend in the media room, likes to say, an actual victory parade for an actual victory is better than a lot of the parades we hold around here for, sort of fabricated achievements of winning off seasons.
Well, it's a broader topic, but this is a Bears centric pod. But Ryan Poles has put himself in a position where he is the most secure sports executive in Chicago, in my opinion, right now.
For now.
Next question.
All right. No, this one is from this one is from Jake on Twitter. Do you think we're overblowing the center position issues if we don't have the handful of blown snaps last year? Is this even a main talking point? I understand wanting to have a good center for a rookie quarterback, but come on, it's the center.
I don't think it's overblown, David. I think that that is the position that you want stabilized, particularly with a young quarterback, a guy that can keep things steady, a guy that can direct traffic, a guy that can point out things to help you with protections, a guy that can be an every week starter. And so there's a competition going on right now. I think Ryan Bates remains the favorite to win the competition, but Coleman Shelton is getting ample opportunity to show on the practice field what he can bring to the table. And I think until you have that position solidified, you don't know what you're missing when it's unsolidified, if that makes sense. And so I don't think it's overblown. I think it's a big deal to the health of this offense and in particular, the growth of this young rookie quarterback.
I think the questioner might have been listening to the Mully and Haugh show the other day, because I on the first or second day of practice, I did go on a mini little, I don't want to say diatribe or rant, but I did express a little bit of like, are you kidding me? It's July 23rd and we're worried about who's snapping the ball to Caleb Williams. Let it play out. Give it some time. I'm not worried about if he's left-handed or right-handed or who's first and who's next. And I do think I maybe left the suggestion it wasn't as important as some other jobs. I'm surprised that there's competition. I think you want continuity. Eventually, I think you'll get competition and then you'll settle on a guy and you'll get the continuity. Injuries happen. I do understand what the Bears are trying to do here, because if somebody goes down, you have to be able to plug in somebody and play. You want that guy to have experience with your quarterback. So I don't have a big problem yet with the fact they haven't chosen one. I tend to think that it sounds like Ryan Bates is the quick speed guy and Coleman Shelton is the big physical burly guy, according to the defensive lineman's perspective and some of the descriptions, and you watch it on tape and you understand it. But I am not going to worry yet about one's left-handed, one's right-handed. Oh my gosh, are they going to get the shotgun snap on third down? Let's let it play out. Let's see who wins the competition, and then we'll panic. One more.
Yeah, we got a few more weeks. Yep.
All right, guys, one more. This is my favorite question, or you can consider this a comment that I've seen today. This is from Crystal Lake Mike on Twitter. Why have there been so few updates about Tory Taylor? I'm worried he's getting lost in all of this Caleb hype. A daily update would suffice.
Well, Dan, we know you love kickers, so I wonder why you don't supply a daily Tory Taylor update.
Well, here we are. On Thursday morning at Hallis Hall, Tory Taylor was part of a live punting session where him and the left footer, Corliss Waitman, punted some balls to the Bears returners. And by the way, there's a whole long list of guys trying to get into the punt return competition. But Tory Taylor is still Tory Taylor. He's still doing the things he did in the spring. He's got a really, really good, powerful leg. He's got really good touch on the football. And ultimately, as camp evolves, we're going to see more of those periods that are designed specifically for punting, and we'll be able to shine our light a little bit more on trick shot Tory. I know there's some jealousy that Caleb's stealing all the hype when we've got another rookie in town that's very worthy of stealing the highlights.
I know. I mean, look, I was upset when the Bulls traded for Josh Giddey because I thought that Australia is now going to focus its sports attention and fandom on Giddey and away from Tory Taylor. I mean, there can only be one Aussie at a time. And why? By the way, who is this left-footed punter they brought into camp? Why are they trying to mess with Tory Taylor's head? Get out of his head. Let him kick. Let's give him the attention he deserves.
Corliss Waitman had a punt today that bounced at the 4 and kind of backspun to the 7. And I just shouted from the media bleachers. I said, punter competition, ? And that got a pretty good laugh because we know we're always looking to manufacture competition at training camps. And so I think I may have successfully done that after one punt by the lefty.
Well, I'd like to have Brad Biggs, after he's done exhaustively researching who is the starting quarterback to play in the Hall of Fame game, goodness sakes, after that arduous research, I want Biggsy to dig into the last camp punter who made the team. Who was the best challenger to Brad Maynard, for instance, or Bob Parsons going way back? What camp foot made an impact and created a memory?
Who can forget the Tress Way versus Adam Podlish competition?
Adam Podlish, yes.
Yeah, remember that? I think that was
the first
that may have been one of the competition. And then maybe once or twice Mega Punt had somebody else in here to push him a little bit, and it worked. But we've been through a lot here in a decade plus on the beat here at Hallis Hall. But if we can get a legitimate Tory Taylor, Corliss Waitman punting competition here in the month of August, then we've really accomplished something.
That would be fun. Adam, do we have any more we can answer quickly?
It's a big fat nope from Adam. So
I guess it's a no. I think we were all out of mailbag items. I think we can keep them coming. We'll answer them next time we have the time to get to the mail, because it's fun to answer questions that people have. The fans are out at Hallis Hall. There's going to be more activity, more buzz, and more practice. As preseason is just getting started. So week 1 in the books, and we're happy to be here to answer your questions. We'll wrap it up and be back next week talking about the Bears getting ready for Canton, who's going to play, what does it look like, and we'll be here for every step of the way. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast. For our mail carrier, Adam Studzinski, Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, I'm David Haugh for the Mully and Haugh Show. Thank you for listening to Take the North.
Great talk. See you out there.